Hello, and thank you for stopping by on the Therapist Poetry podcast, where we meet real people from real life and they share their real experiences with us, their real stories. We're actually about to go and meet a therapist now, so follow me and let's go meet them. Oh, I nearly forgot. If you are moved by their story, then don't forget to let them know and leave them a comment. Don't be stingy and keep all that positivity to yourself. Hello, Anna. Thank you for coming on today.
Hello.
Hello. And Anna is a counsellor from Australia who is here today to talk about her experience of miscarriage. Could you say a little bit about your experience at the time, Anna, and after?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. So in 2015, after a period of trying to get pregnant, my husband and I found out that we were pregnant, which obviously we were very excited about. You know, all the ideas that you have for what that's going to look like and your hopes and everything. So yeah, happy times. And then we found out that actually, one day I started bleeding, found out that actually I had miscarried. And it was it was obviously a huge, huge loss, but I suppose something that I wasn't really prepared for. I think
Yeah.
like no one kind of goes into a pregnancy thinking, oh yeah, like it might not turn out. Um, and I probably wasn't prepared for how significantly it would impact me, or how I suppose my view of the treatment of like miscarriage also, and my experience in that kind of medical setting and how it was handled and managed and all of those sorts of things, and how I felt that that actually impacted my experience
Okay.
more. Like it made it actually quite difficult and harder for me to actually I suppose not just process what had happened, but be able to kind of move on. Yeah, so that was in 2015, and I developed quite a lot of anxiety as a result of the miscarriage. Yeah, which kind of just went on to impact me for a while to come. Um, yeah.
It's really interesting to hear all the changes that happened as a result of that anxiety that come from that after.
Mm, yeah, it would even just be like the classic, and I didn't know that it was a classic thing, but like being in the supermarket and I'd have like my whole basket of, you know, stuff that I needed to buy, my groceries and everything, and I just had to get out of there. And I
Yeah.
just had to like leave my basket and leave as soon as possible. And
Mhm.
like it didn't matter if my husband was with me or if I was alone. That overwhelming sense of panic. Um, yeah, it would just happen.
Are you ready for me to ask you some questions, or would you like to say
Yeah.
some more about the?
No, I think we can go on to the questions. Yeah.
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 Okay. Okay. So, what is one thing that you wish you knew at the time of your miscarriage?
So I think one of the things that probably would have been really helpful was to know how common it actually is. Um, because I think you can't help but feel like you've done something wrong. Or like logically, I know when other people miscarry, I never think, oh, I wonder what they did, to make that happen. Never. But when it happens to you, I think it's just something that you do. You're just like, well, maybe I did this, or maybe I didn't do that. Or so there's a lot of like blame, I think, that people can place on themselves, or
Yeah.
that I definitely placed on myself. And I think it's something like 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. So it's
Wow.
actually really, really common. But we don't talk about it. So, and we don't talk about it because it makes people feel uncomfortable. And so we just have all of these, yeah, like all of these people that are dealing with pregnancy loss, um, and not talking about it because no one, I don't want to sound horrible when I say this, but no one really wants to hear about it because it's uncomfortable and people don't necessarily, not everybody, but a lot of people don't like to sit in that. So I think knowing how common it is and how prevalent it is probably would have helped a little bit just in that kind of regard.
Yeah. So I mean that's really interesting stat, isn't it? 1 out of 4
Mm,
pregnancies, and I can hear that that helps. And there's something there with the blame of
yeah,
if it's
yeah,
so common, maybe the blame's obviously something that you know cognitively isn't your fault, but on an emotional level, it's something you can't help to bring up. But that stat really puts it out there that this is something that happens often, and it's not your fault.
yeah, yeah. And I think we always want something to blame. Like we just don't want to accept that things just happen sometimes. It's like, well, what can we do to like prevent this from happening next time? So I don't even think it's something that we realize that we do. I think that we just like, need to feel like we have some sort of control. And
Yeah,
if I've done something wrong, it's horrible, but maybe I can stop it from happening the next time. You know, like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's yeah, that sense of control, and like, quite often with grief, what comes up are the what ifs. What could I have done differently
Mm.
if I didn't do this? And I understand that you had counselling at the time, so I'm just wondering how counselling helped you at that time, and if there's any counselling theory in particular that was useful for you.
Yeah, it took me a little while, to be honest, to talk to someone about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I did, I found that it took me a few tries to find someone that I actually felt um, comfortable with, I suppose, to talk about it with and who could, give me maybe what I needed or was looking for. Um, and I think the thing that really helped for me was just having someone who was willing to actually give me that space to
Mm.
talk about how I was feeling. Someone who had no emotional kind of connection to me.
Yeah.
Because everybody that is emotionally connected to you wants to make it better, right? That's their instinct. Whereas, talking to a counselor, it's very, very different and a lot more space to kind of work through all the different things that came up as a result of the miscarriage. So, there was the one thing of I was grieving this loss because I so desperately wanted to have a baby and then didn't, like found out that that wasn't going to happen. So there was that, but then there was, the guilt and like the blame that came with that. And then there was this thing of, there was the anxiety that came with it and the panic attacks.
Mm.
But there was also like my experience with like the obstetrician and even my GP and this sort of thing of like as much as miscarriage needs to be normalized, we also need to acknowledge that it's significant.
Yeah.
And it was kind of very much like my GP when I was bleeding, they said to me, "Well, we can't stop you from having a miscarriage." And I was like, well, yeah, I know that. Like, but I'm here, like, I'm at the doctor's because something's not right, like, so it's just this thing of like talking to you a little bit like you're an idiot, but
Yeah.
also, in that same space where I've found out that I'm having a miscarriage, saying, you're just a bit anxious. And I have to say, like, it just followed me from there. Like, I'm not saying that that doctor made me anxious, but like, it's just all these little experiences that kind of, mesh together. And then they create this experience, right? So there's all these different things that kind of interplay. Um, yeah. And so having someone who just kind of let me, what you're doing now, waffle, and actually talk about, the different parts of how I was feeling and why I was feeling them and the validation as well that they provided really helped. Like being given permission to feel angry and sad and all sorts of different things that came up with it. And, you know, um, having someone kind of reframe it so that I could understand it from another perspective. Because I feel like, you know, even though we are counselors and we help people all the time, when something happens to us, it's very different. And it can be harder to do that. Well, it's kind of impossible to do the reframing for yourself sometimes when it's such a significant thing. So yeah,
I mean, the relationship was really important for you. I can hear as you tried two or
yeah,
three different counsellors first, and kind of getting what you didn't get from the GPs there as well, which was the compassion and the understanding and the space for you to be you rather than just a number that's come to the
mm,
doctors. I can really hear that. And so, I mean, I guess the next question goes into that, which is name one thing that had a negative impact on
mm.
your experience of your miscarriage.
Yeah, and I would say it was, I'd say it was probably two things. I think the thing that had the most negative impact was um, my interaction with the medical kind of system. Because I also had an obstetrician, and they were really reluctant to just kind of, like when I miscarried, they gave me some medication to try and like, fast track the bleeding process and whatever, but it didn't really work. So like, I was bleeding for like 3 months.
Okay.
So there was just that constant physical kind of um, reminder
Yeah.
as well of what was happening.
Mm.
And so it didn't matter how much I asked them to just give me like just do a curette and all of that kind of thing, just to, you know, kind of finish it off sort of thing. They really didn't want to do it. And so after the 3 months, they finally did it. So even just that, like having to beg someone to do something to your body to make you feel better, um, was a really, really negative experience when you're already going
Yeah.
through something that is so like emotionally and physically draining anyway. Um, but yeah, and that's probably the main thing that was negative about my experience. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
I mean, yeah, I can really hear that your body as well. And it's that
Mm.
almost looking for that person-centered care from doctors and things that could really
Yeah.
be beneficial in these cases.
Mm.
Yeah. And also, could you name one thing that had a positive impact on your experience?
I think one of the really positive things was that when I had my miscarriage, and because I can't not speak about things, when I started talking about the fact that I had a miscarriage, um, there were so many people in my life who had a miscarriage.
Okay.
Um, who I didn't know had a miscarriage. So I made all of these, I heard all of these really amazing stories and made all of these different kind of connections with people in my life who had actually been through a similar thing to me. Um, which was a very positive thing because, when it first happens, you're just like, oh my God, I'm gonna feel like this forever. Like it's gonna be this horrible forever. Um, but then, like it was particularly at work, there were a few women who were like a lot older than me, like in their late 40s or 50s or whatever at that time. And they had other kids and other things and but also really normalize the fact that, yeah, like they still think about the miscarriage that they had.
Mm.
But, and what that baby might have been like and what they may have grown up to be and all of those sorts of things. So really normalize this thing of, yeah, you're actually going to miss the fact that you didn't get to meet this baby for the rest of your life, but you will move on. But not in such a harsh way, but just through like the anecdotal kind of stories that were really nice to hear.
I mean, there's almost a permission in there for you to feel how you feel for as long as you do.
Yeah, yeah. Which I don't think we really allow with grief, like in general as a society. I think like, there's this expectation that you kind of move on, and that you should move on. And, you get the questions of, so have you started trying again? And it's like, good, not really,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and those sorts of things, or you don't want to put it off too long, it'll be harder. The longer you put it off, the harder it'll be.
Yeah.
Like those, you know,
Mm.
I feel like it just reflects our kind of inability to just let people grieve in their own way and in their own time.
Yeah, and that's really important. And a lot of the things you heard there, it's those comments they can feel really hard to hear as well.
Mm, yeah. And I know people are well-meaning when they say that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, um, like I got a lot of at least it was early on, like in terms of, how early I was when I miscarried. And it's like, like I get it. I get that I wasn't full term and that's a whole different thing. But, it doesn't really matter in that moment,
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. And what other parts of your life did your experience of your miscarriage affect?
So it impacted a lot of aspects. It impacted a lot of, especially early on, it
Yeah.
really impacted like when I was in social settings as well, because I would get quite overwhelmed. And like not everybody, I didn't tell everybody that I had had the miscarriage.
Yeah.
So like we'd go to functions and things and people would make comments like, "Oh, why are you guys waiting so long to have kids?" Because then it did take us a little while to have another pregnancy. And people just make these comments without realizing how hurtful they are because
Yeah.
firstly you've had a miscarriage, then you're trying to have another, you're trying to get pregnant again, and it's like, gosh, what's wrong with you guys? Why aren't you trying? And I found that really hard to deal with, and I would just like shut down. So like I'd be at a wedding and I just like the doors would just close and I just wasn't there and I
Mm.
could feel it happening. So it really impacted like that sort of side of my life. But I think it also impacted the way that I saw grief as well, or think about grief. Even though I had had a lot of losses growing up, like, grandparents and things like that. So it wasn't my first loss as such, but a different type of loss. And I think I never realized how I just thought that maybe there'd be a little bit more kind of understanding and empathy around it. But I felt like because I never met the baby and no one ever physically met this baby that never was.
Yeah.
It was just like something that never really existed. So it's okay. Like, you just kind of need to carry on, have another one. So I think it really kind of changed, or not changed, but it just kind of awoken that, I don't know, it made me realize that. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, it does exist to you. I think is what
Yeah,
you're trying to say, and it felt like it didn't to other people. So there's
yeah.
a lot of there's a loneliness in that, and when you're going to the parties and people are saying making comments about whatever, and you were alone in that. You were alone in
Mm,
that grief at that moment, and I think that's a really important point to make for anyone who's watching this. Really, is to really be careful about the comments that you make because
mm,
you never know what someone's going through or what they've gone through.
yeah.
And we're just going to leave it with one final question before we go to your poem, and that's what advice would you give others that have experienced a miscarriage?
I feel like this is probably the hardest question, to be
Yeah,
honest, but I think the only advice that I can give is to be as kind as possible to yourself because it is such a really, really hard time. And like you may have people that are really understanding and loving and caring, you may not. But I think like you just, yeah, need to be kind to yourself, try and take care of yourself and feel what you're feeling for as long as you need to feel it, I think is really important as well. Yeah.
that's great advice to end with. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your poem. Are you ready to share it with us?
Yes, thank you.
10 years. 10 years of loving you, but never seeing you. 10 years of missing you, but never holding you. 10 years of thinking of you, but never speaking of you. 10 years of silent grief, silent loss, and silent longing. 10 years of not hearing you laugh or cry. 10 years of not seeing you smile. 10 years of wondering how my life would be if I had been lucky enough to have you with me.
Thank you for watching. Seriously, it means the world to me and our guests that you took the time to watch. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it really does help the channel to grow. And equally, you won't miss what's coming next if you do that. The aim of this channel and what me and the guests are trying to do is we're trying to inspire, and we're also trying to give other people a sense of belonging. And at the very least, we're trying to make other people feel seen and heard. And that's our hope with this channel. If this video spoke to you anyway, then please do check out our other videos just here. We will catch you in the next episode.